Hello and a very good day. My name is Abhilash and I am from the AD Solutions team here at Manage Engine. The people here at Manage Engine call me Abhi. Now, before we go ahead and jump into today's webinar and see what's in store for us, I would like to thank all of you for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time. And I really hope all of you are safe and healthy and indoors. Now, before I jump in with today's webinar and today's agenda, I would like to run a quick audio and a video check because I want to make sure that everybody out here today is able to hear me well and is able to see the screen or the video well. So I'll just start off with a quick audio check, right? If my voice is reaching to you well and clear, if the audio is well and clear without any distortion, just use the chat box that you see in front of you and give me a confirmation message. Just say yes, just say okay, so I can confirm that the audio is reaching to you well and clear without any trouble. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much, David. All right, perfect. Now, if you can see the screen, the title and my email ID, just give me another confirmation, please. This is just to make sure everything is okay. Awesome. Looks like I've received a few confirmation. Thank you so much. Perfect. Now, before we go ahead and jump in, I would like to tell you that the entire session today is being recorded and the recording would reach to you on your email post the webinar. So if you've got any questions, please use the chat box in front of you and keep them coming. And towards the end of the webinar, I will take your questions and I will do my best to answer them. But no worries, even if I miss answering your questions, or if you get questions later in the day after the webinar, you can just drop me an email at abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com, and I would be more than happy to help you out. So yes, now that all the housekeeping things are done, let's go ahead and dive into today's webinar. So today's webinar's topic is improving security identity management for the hybrid cloud. Now, why did I choose to speak about this topic today, and why are we focusing on the hybrid environment? Now, it's no secret that organizations are now slowly embracing the cloud infrastructure. Cloud is slowly becoming the new normal, right? What I mean by this is it's just not traditional on-prem Active Directory anymore. Organizations are slowly looking towards cloud applications, toward third-party vendors like Office 365 or Azure or Google Suite or Skype for Business. Right now, granted that adopting the cloud environment along with our on-premises environment has helped us a lot. It has helped us outsource resources to our users without having to spend much, and the productivity has drastically increased. But the problem is, with the introduction of the cloud, managing accesses and managing permissions has become very complex, right? Because the whole point I'm trying to put forth here is that it's just not on-prem anymore. Organizations are slowly embracing or shifting to the cloud, but the shift isn't complete either. So organizations have adopted a hybrid IT approach. Now, managing access and permissions was always an issue with our on-prem environment, but with the introduction of cloud applications, the problem has gotten compounded. The problem has drastically expanded because now identities are everywhere, right? Identities are accessing everything. For instance, it's not just one logon an administrator needs to monitor, because now users can potentially log on across multiple applications. Similarly, managing resources, changing permissions are not just dependent on on-premises environments, but also the cloud environments. And the fact that users have multiple devices using which they log in and get their job done, the problem is only increasing because now identities are spread across distributions, right? Across on-prem and cloud distributions, and managing access and permissions is becoming really, really challenging. So that's going to be the crux of today's webinar, right? We're going to learn how to gain insight into our hybrid IT environment, and we are going to learn how to fix any vulnerabilities that we may see. So this is going to be a step-by-step approach. First, we start off with gaining visibility and insights, and then we'll try to fix the problems that come in a hybrid IT environment, right? Finally, the end result is going to be a streamlined access and permission management scheme for your hybrid IT. Now, this is going to be today's agenda. We're going to take a look at the cloud adoption rate in 2020, right? Let's see what the cloud adoption rate is like. Is it the new normal? Are organizations going to fully shift to the cloud in 2020, or are they still going to follow the hybrid approach? The second part of today's webinar, we'll try to understand the evolution of the hybrid infrastructure, how it all started. The third part of today's webinar, we'll see why enterprises oscillate or tend towards hybrid IT. Why is hybrid IT the most ideal option for enterprises? Fourth webinar, we'll address a few challenges that come in with the hybrid infrastructures and hybrid IT environment. And like I said, last but not the least, we'll employ a phased approach or a step-by-step approach to streamline access and permissions and secure them for a hybrid IT environment. So the cloud adoption rate in 2020, is it the new normal? Now, this report was generated by Flexera in 2019. 2020 isn't done yet, so we'll have to wait for it. But these statistics are good enough for us to determine what the future would look like. We can now see that most organizations are slowly adopting the cloud. They're adopting a mix of public cloud, private cloud, and most organizations are adopting a hybrid infrastructure, meaning a combination of clouds, combination of public clouds, private clouds, and also on-premises environments, right? You can now see that the workloads are massively in the cloud, with 38% workloads and 41% workloads in the cloud and just 21% workloads in on-prem environments. Organizations who are unwilling to watch are also slowly trying to adapt the cloud mechanism or the cloud deployment approach step by step, as you can see right here. So 69% organizations, the important thing to focus here, are going to adopt the hybrid cloud approach. These are stats from 2019, and it's predicted that the hybrid IT approach or the hybrid cloud approach is going to grow in 2020 as well. So the evolution of hybrid cloud, how did it all start? So as you can see, I've numbered these things here for better visibility. So this is what I'm trying to say, right? It first started off with our on-premises environments. Typically, Windows Server environments, Active Directory environments, on-premises file servers, resources on on-premises, the whole deal. Slowly, as employees needed to get more things done and needed access to more resources, organizations started to develop applications, right? Applications that ran on-premise, but on the cloud, right? So the transition from traditional on-prem slowly went up to on-premises applications, and slowly organizations started to adapt the public cloud infrastructure as well, because they clearly started noticing the benefits, right? Public cloud infrastructure means there is no need to build your own infrastructure. You can depend on the third-party vendors' infrastructure and you can get most of the job done. Right? Public cloud infrastructure such as Amazon Web Services or Azure Active Directory are increasingly in demand now, right? And the problem here is the transition that you see from on-prem to the cloud is not fully complete yet, because there are many applications on-prem, many resources on-prem that cannot be directly put into the cloud, right? And organizations would like to have the little bit of control that they have on on-premises environments. So the shift isn't fully complete, which led to the hybrid IT approach. So hybrid IT, mix of on-premises, private clouds, public clouds, and an orchestration between all of the platforms. That's how it all started, right? Right from on-prem to private to public, and then combine all of them together to get a hybrid IT approach, to get the best of both the worlds. Now, why is hybrid IT ideal for enterprises? Why do enterprises tend to choose the hybrid IT approach? Number one, like I said, it's expensive and complex to retrofit in-house or on-prem applications to support the cloud. right? There are many applications that you might be running in tandem with your on-prem servers or on-prem Active Directory. And it's extremely complex to change the configuration, to retrofit these applications to support the cloud, and not to mention the expense involved. So organizations need the support from the cloud. Organizations like the support from the cloud, but they are unwilling to transition completely to the cloud. So they use a combination of on-prem and cloud. Organizations, like I said, typically like to maintain some kind of control. They do not like to relinquish their control completely to a third-party provider. So they tend to take the hybrid IT approach again. This can help in business continuity. For example, let's say you are an organization's CEO or an administrator, right? And you take all your data and you trust a third-party provider with the data. And let's say the third-party provider crashes one day. What would you do? Your organization's productivity, your organization's work style would come to a complete halt. So in order to maintain business continuity, organizations adopt the hybrid IT approach, and also to avoid vendor lock-in. Right? Vendor lock-in is a term that's a buzzword that's thrown around everywhere. What it typically means is organizations do not like to be dependent on a particular vendor, because the more the dependency increases on the vendor, the more purchases we make from the vendor, and the shift to anything else from that particular third-party vendor would be very challenging or would be very difficult. Hybrid IT is cost effective and scalable. For example, all organizations are growing. The number of users are growing. The workload is growing, right? And scaling on-premises environments, scaling the infrastructure, scaling the storage, scaling the speed to support all of this can be very cost prohibitive. So they tend to adapt the cloud environments, be it a private cloud or a public cloud. And last but not the least, lower capital expenditure and increased reliability. Right? So when you don't have to purchase infrastructure for your organization, when you don't have to purchase resources for your on-prem network, and you take the support from the cloud, the price or the cost is comparatively less. And it's also easily scalable, right? For instance, let's say there's a spike in your organization's activity. There's a sudden spike that your on-premises can't handle. What would you do if you do not use a cloud approach? You'll have to purchase more resources for your on-prem. But if you do use a cloud approach, there's a process called the cloud burst, using which you can simply take the extra work or take the extra load on your on-prem infrastructure and just share it with the cloud for a temporary period of time. So this is going to be a prepaid or a rented approach. It's called the cloud burst approach. Right? So there are many reasons why hybrid IT is an ideal approach for enterprises, but these, according to me, are the top few reasons. Now, what are the challenges that come in with a hybrid infrastructure? Now, like I said, if everything was prim and proper, we needn't be having this session today, right? And like I said, with the increase in cloud, the problem of access and permission management has grown. Right? Number one is lack of sufficient visibility or lack of insights. What's happening here is that organizations tend to use a mix of applications, a mix of Azure Active Directory, let's say, a mix of on-prem Exchange servers, and a mix of on-prem Active Directory. Right? When they use a mix of public clouds, private clouds, and on-prem infrastructures, they are suffering, they are finding it challenging to gain the visibility that they need. Right? And administrators often tend to use the native tools to get the visibility, but it's very difficult because these tools essentially operate in silos. Now, what do I mean by this? Let me say this with an example, right? Your on-prem Active Directory uses the event viewer to record events. Your Azure Active Directory uses the audit logs in Azure Active Directory to record the events, right? Your Salesforce application probably has another auditing method. So when this happens, it's difficult for us to take all the events at one place and watch them and look at them for any changes, because these are separate tools and they operate in separate silos, right? And the most fundamental point, if you cannot see the accesses, if you cannot see the permissions, if you cannot see what's happening within your environment, how can you control it, or how can you secure it? How can you even start with securing it? The second problem is that there is no streamlined approach. System administrators need to toggle between multiple tools and multiple windows to get job done. Now, let me illustrate this using an example. This is a fine Monday morning and your HR gives you a call and you are a system administrator to create 100 users in Azure AD, Office 365, on-prem Active Directory, and on-prem Exchange servers. What would you do then? There are essentially three tools you need to use: the Active Directory Users and Computers tool, right? The Exchange Administrator console and the Azure AD portal or the Office 365 portal. There are 3 to 4 tools that an administrator needs to toggle across to simply provision users access. And the same applies when you have to deprovision access as well. The last problem is very clear. Permissions are spread everywhere. The lack of a unified model for your hybrid IT, for your on-prem and your cloud deployments makes access and permissions widespread. So managing them or securing them or even viewing them becomes very, very difficult. Now let me quickly show you an example here, right? How insecure management of accesses can lead to security breaches. So if I head on to my VM right here, you can now see that I'm logged in as a user. Let me quickly open up a tool called PowerShell. Right now, this is a built-in Windows tool. I'm logged in as a user called Ross, like you can see here. Now let me quickly increase the size of this and show you a small experiment. Why we need to manage access securely and how failing to do so can put your organization at risk. Right, so this is Ross. So what I'm going to do now is run a command called PowerShell.exe-exec and then bypass. Right, so running this command is to basically bypass PowerShell's execution policy, so I can invoke or run any script that I wish. Right, so once that's done, let me quickly shift to the desktop. And now you can see that I have a module here, again, freely available over the internet. Just Google it and you can download it. It's called the Power Up module. So let me import module./powerup.ps1. Now that the module is imported, let me quickly run a check called invoke all checks. So what's going to happen is that this module or the script basically is going to look for Ross's privileges on-premises Active Directory. Any sign of privilege escalation that the tool can abuse, it will use it. For instance, it looks for unattended install files. It looks for GPO settings. It looks for group memberships where Ross may have gotten administrative or privileged access. Right? It also looks into the registry. So once that's done, let me quickly run a command called write user add MSI. Right? So I've minimized this just so I can show you what's happening here. And once I click enter, did you see this? This was not there when we started, right? So using an end user, namely Ross, we were able to push out an MSI application. And who was Ross? Let me quickly show you something right here. If I run a command called net user Ross, right, the logged on user, you can see that Ross is a member of these 3 groups: remote desktop users, support Australia, and domain users. So Ross is not a privileged user or an administrator of any kind, just a standard domain user, right? So now that the application is out here, let me quickly run it and show you what happens. Do you see what's happening here? Now, all I have to do is add a user. Let's say I am an attacker, R for Ross, right? Let me give in a password at 123. Now I would want to add this attacker to the administrators group. And once I click create, let me show you what just happened, right? So net local group administrators. I'm simply querying for the administrator group memberships. And here we have, where's the attacker? Here we have, I am an attacker R, right? We were able to add a backdoor user to the administrators group. Now attacks are generally not this straightforward. I could add the user to another group and nest the group memberships to hide this particular backdoor user's access. But I just wanted to put forth the point that if you do not manage accesses properly, this will cause a problem. right? Like we just saw, I was an end user, and just by using a script and a native tool like PowerShell, I was able to add a backdoor user in my on-premises environment, right? That's how straightforward it is to attack now. Now, there are three crucial questions that need answering whenever you try to secure access within your organization. Number one, which users have access to which resources? Number two, what are the users doing with the access? And number three, are there effective controls for managing access? So a strong identity and access governance model is crucial in this point, right? And you need to be sure that the security that you set up or the identity and access governance model helps the administrator, but at the same time does not trouble the end user, right? So there's a very fine line between setting up security and making sure the user is comfortable, and we need to watch that space. So let's take a step-by-step approach to secure hybrid IT. So the first thing that I would want for you to do is to try and gain visibility into your hybrid IT infrastructure. Where would you start, right? For this example or for this webinar, we will be looking at Office 365, Azure Active Directory, on-premises Active Directory, file servers, and applications like Exchange that are installed on-prem, right? So obtaining valuable insights on premises. Let's just start with on premises, right? Where would you start? You've got users, groups, files and folders, group policies, computers, and cloud applications like Exchange and Office 365. Where would you start first? So let's just start off with the on-prem, right? Let's take a step-by-step or a phased approach. The first thing that I would like for you to do is to monitor your group memberships. So if I quickly minimize this and head on to my browser here, you can now see I have an instance of AD Manager Plus. AD Manager Plus is a web-based tool that we offer, using which you can streamline permissions and access in your hybrid IT environment, right? So AD Manager Plus, all I have to do now is head into reports. So these are ready-made reports that you could use for finding valuable insights or gaining the visibility that you need on your hybrid infrastructure. Now, the first report I said was your group memberships. Right now, quickly, if I head into users and groups, you can now see that there's a group called domain admins. You could select multiple groups here if you wish to as well. And if I scroll down, you can see members of the domain administrators group, right? And you can now see that Ross is also a member of the domain administrators group. And let me quickly show you what happened here. What did Active Directory tell us? Ross is just a member of these groups alone, and Ross is not an administrator, but AD Manager Plus tells us that Ross is a member of the domain admins group. So how did this happen? Let me quickly head into reports again. Let's see the groups for users, right? Let's select Ross right here. And if I scroll down, you can now see that Ross is a member of Support Australia, right? We knew that already. That's what Active Directory told us. And Support Australia is a member of a group called Support Emergency. And Support Emergency is a member of Domain Administrators Group. And that's how Ross got domain admin privilege, right? Via nested group memberships, not via direct memberships. Now, let me quickly jump back to the experiment that we just performed, the application that we just installed. Right now, when you typically try to run an MSI application, you will have to give in administrator credentials. But in this case, Ross was able to do it directly without having to give in any admin or privileged credentials. That happened because Ross was actually an administrator via nested or indirect memberships, right? And AD Manager Plus can help you do that. All you have to do is simply select the users or the groups that you want, and you can take in the action. You can fix the vulnerabilities then and there, right? So if I head into reports here, let's say users and groups, we've got domain admins group right here. Select Ross, and you can delete Ross from the group. You can disable Ross. You can remove Ross from the group, and you can carry out more management actions or vulnerability fixes like you can see here. Now, this report is exportable. You could schedule this report so you could receive it on your email, and you can add in more columns mainly the attributes that you wish to see in the report as well. Simply select them, add them, hit OK, and you're good to go. You have all information of the users, the group they belong to, the OU they belong to, the distinguished name, the display name, the whole deal, right? And the key thing to notice here is AD Manager Plus can look for nested group memberships as well, something that Active Directory tools like the ADUC tool by default cannot do. Right, so these are two reports that I would like for you to check out for groups. We've got a detailed group report here as well. For instance, if I head into detailed group members, right, I can select a group right here. Let's just say the administrators group. Here we go. Right now, I can filter and search for specific memberships of that group. For instance, if I want to see users that are members of administrator group and are mail enabled, and I do not want to see users that are disabled, you can set the filter right here. Similarly, you can set filters on groups, you can set filters on computers, meaning if I just want to see workstations and nothing else, I can set those filters right here, right? And of course, you've got more and more opportunities where you can drill down and set custom filters based on attributes as well. For instance, if I head into the user object here and click on columns, you can now see that I can further filter the membership of the group. I can further filter the report by selecting specific attributes if need may come. Right now, all I have to do is hit generate and we will have our data right in front of us. So those are the things that I would like for you to look for. User reports, under nested reports, users and groups for users, and group reports, check out detailed group members, and a lot more that's happening here. It's just the first thing that I would like for you to do. Monitor group memberships and mainly nested group memberships, right? For your on-premises environments. Because this would help you monitor your on-prem and also applications that are connected to your on-prem. The next thing that I would like for you to do is to watch for user password changes, right? User password status typically. So if I head into AD Manager Plus again, under reports, we've got password reports. Now let me just click on password changed users like you can see right here. And let's say I want to find out users who changed their passwords within the last 30 days. Right, so here we have our data and you can find out which user has changed a password within 30 days. And here we have a backdoor user as well. If I head back into reports, there's much more you can do. If you want to see which users haven't changed their passwords in a long time, you can generate a report. And again, you can generate reports between multiple domains. You can drill down to OUs and generate report. You can select a time period, meaning you can go back in time, hit generate, and you're good to go. And you can see a user called Emma and Jake haven't reset their password from 461 days. Now I would want to alert the user, or I would want to force a password reset, right? So I'll just select the user, click on change password at next logon, and that's it. When the user logs on next, he or she will have to change the password. So password reports here for you to gain the insight that you need on the password condition of your on-premises environment. Right now, the next thing that I would like for you to do is check out for users whose properties are modified, meaning users who are added to groups, users whose permissions have changed, users whose attributes have changed. And we can help you with that as well. So if I head into user reports, we've got something called recently modified users, right? Once you hit generate, you can find out all users who have been modified in the recent time. For instance, you can see Ross right here. Where is he? Let me just quickly search, right? So these reports are searchable as well. So Ross right here has been modified and added to this group, right? So here you have the information right in front of you. You can set this information and you can be ready. You can alert the administrator or a help desk technician whenever this happens. Right? And of course, you can simply select the user and take management actions right from where you've generated the report. No toggling between tools. Simply generate the information and take the corrective actions. So that's the third thing that I would like for you to do. Monitor user objects for creation and for attribute changes as well. And there are a bunch of reports here. For instance, users with duplicate attributes, users with empty attributes, recently modified users, users with or without a logon script. There are a multitude of reports here that can help you achieve just that. right? And not just users. I would like for you to check other objects as well. For instance, computer reports. You can select the inactive computers and you can decide what to do with them, delete them or disable them, right? You can check your contacts. You can check your organizational unit changes, meaning users who are added to an organizational unit, or permissions that are modified on an organizational unit. All of that you can find right here. So that's the next thing that I would like for you to do. Monitor what your users are, monitor the properties of your users, either modified or newly created users, right? The fourth thing that I would like for you to do is to look for inactive or stale user accounts. Now, inactive accounts are typically accounts that are enabled, right? But they haven't logged on in a long, long time. Now, these accounts are like candy for attackers, right? Because they are essentially valid. You can simply use the credentials and log in, and you will not raise a red flag within the organization as an attacker because they are simply inactive and not disabled, right? So an attacker can typically leverage an inactive or stale account to remain invisible within an organization's IT infrastructure. So this is how inactive accounts can be secured with an AD Manager Plus. Just head into user reports and you've got something called inactive users right here. Simply select the time, the domain, and you are good to go. Now let me quickly search and see if we have any kind of an administrator. Here we go. We have a server admin who has been inactive from 2019, right? From the last year, this user has been inactive. And if an attacker gets hold of such users, he or she can log in as that user and remain invisible within your organization's infrastructure. Again, simply check and carry out the corrective actions like disable the user or move the user to another container, right? Or a combination of actions as well. So that's something that I would like for you to do. Next up, monitor user logon activity. And last but not the least, monitor other objects like I told you and connected applications. Connected applications like Exchange on-prem within your organization. So in order to monitor user logon activity, all you have to do is head into reports here. Under user reports, you've got something called recently logged on users, right? You can use the users who've recently logged on. If I head into real last logon right here, you can determine through which domain controller a user logs on. This report is extremely useful because when users log on, they can log on through any domain controller, right? And every domain controller records a fresh logon attempt. So in order to find out from Active Directory from where a user has logged on, you will have to query all the domain controllers, right? And the ADUC tool cannot do that for you. One thing you could do is use the ADUC tool, get into it and check the last logon time for users across all the domain controllers, compare the time to find out the latest logon, right? This is very, very cumbersome and very, very time consuming, but the tool here does it for you, where it queries all domain controllers in your organization that are configured with an AD Manager Plus and gives you a user's true last logon or a real last logon time. Why is this useful? Why do I have to track when my users log on, right? If something goes bad, or if there is a permission change that's happened that's not supposed to, right? You can track that by monitoring from where the logon has happened, from where the suspicious user has logged on, right? And monitoring the domain controllers for logon, because domain controllers are typically your critical servers or your sensitive servers, can help you determine a user's true last logon or a real last logon, right? So the real last logon is another important report that I just wanted to tell you. And I also said monitor your on-prem applications such as Exchange, like you can see right here. There's a lot you can do here, right? Users who have mailboxes, users who do not have mailboxes, right? You can check the user, take the action that you wish from right here. And not just that, you can find out distribution list members, right? Monitoring Active Directory groups is one. The other thing that I would like for you to monitor is groups within connected applications. For instance, Exchange will have distribution list members or distribution groups that receive critical emails, that receive sensitive emails. So you need to monitor those group memberships as well. So there's Exchange reports for you to monitor what's happening within your on-premises Exchange environments. So these are a few things that I would like for you to do for your on-prem infrastructure. Start off with group memberships, check the passwords, check users when for modifications or creations, monitor your stale accounts, monitor user logon activity with the real last logon, users never logged on reports, and last but not the least, check your other on-prem objects for any changes and your connected applications. Now, there's a lot you can do with AD Manager Plus when it comes to monitoring or viewing or visibility, but these are important things that I would like for you to cover and secure right away. And the key thing here is once you generate the information, once you have the report, the management actions are built into the report, right? So you needn't toggle between tools, you needn't go between windows. The management actions are right there. Simply select, run the corrective action, fix the vulnerability, and you are good to go. The next thing that I would like for you to do is look for insights in the cloud as well. Cloud such as Azure Active Directory or Office 365. And this is how it can be done, right? If I quickly open up the browser, head into the Office 365 tab here. This will help you gain insights about your Office 365 environment, right? Let me quickly show that to you. Here we go, Office 365. Oops, looks like it's lagging. Excuse me, I have really poor internet. Let me quickly log in again and show you what's happening within my cloud environments, right? So these reports are for you to obtain visibility for your cloud. So head into Office 365, and this is where you can monitor what's happening, right? Your Office 365 cloud users, your synced users with Office 365, user attributes within Office 365. Any password changes, for instance, users who haven't changed their passwords, users who have never expiring passwords, right? And multi-factor authentication status within Office 365. User logon reports, for instance, users who fail logon within Office 365, right? Inactive users within Office 365, members of groups, right? Security groups, distribution groups in Azure Active Directory or Office 365 to be more precise. You can also watch for your licenses. Users who've got licenses, users whose licenses were changed, users who do not have licenses at all. You can take a step deeper and monitor mailboxes as well, just like we did with Exchange, right? With Exchange, we could monitor all mailboxes and the permissions on the mailboxes like you can see here. And with Office 365, you can do the exact same thing. For instance, monitoring mailbox folder permissions or inbox rules can help you determine which user can read a mailbox, right? And what are mails that can a particular inbox receive or can send out. So this is something that I would like for you to do. Reports right here for all your Active Directory based reports, all your on-premises reports and connected applications like Exchange and also Google Suite, like you can see here, right? And Office 365 tab here to monitor your Azure Active Directory. Right? All of these reports, I'm pretty sure, will give you the visibility or the insights that you need on your environment. And the best part here, no shifting between tools, no using multiple windows, just one tool for you to do your job. Right? Now, there's a lot more you can do, like I said, in AD Manager Plus, but these are a few typical reports that users or administrators tend to ask from time to time. Now, you shouldn't forget your file and your folder permissions, right? Which means your permissions on your Active Directory objects and permissions on your shares and your folders. Your security objects and your files and folders must be monitored for permission changes as well, because your data is your organization's currency, right? And these permissions give access to that data. And trust me, that's what most attackers are after. So how do we go about monitoring permissions, right? What is the way? What can we do? So this is how we can typically monitor permissions within Active Directory. So if I open up the ADUC tool, I'm sure you'd have seen this. If I have to monitor a permission a specific user has, I'll have to check every OU or every group right here. Let's just say the domain controllers OU. I'll have to right click on it, select properties, and hit the security tab to see which users have control over the domain controllers OU, right? This is the only thing you can do using the ADUC tool for all of your users to monitor their permissions on objects. Objects such as organizational unit, objects such as group memberships, or even individual users, like you can see here. If I have to find out which of the users can modify Roy, a user right here, I'll have to right click on Roy, head into properties and select security. And that's the only way I can do it. Now, this is when Microsoft actually heard our problems and they came up with a solution called effective access. So if I head to the domain node on the ADUC tool and click on properties and security and click on advanced, we'll have an option here called effective permissions. Right? So effective permissions helps you to determine the permission that a particular security object, a user or a group has over the domain, over the entire domain. Right? So I'm just going to give this a few seconds to load. Right, so effective access. If let's say I select ROS right here, and once I click view effective access, I can view all permission ROS has on the domain. But this has its own limitations. The first limitation is that there is no object name, right? ROS has full control, but over where? That information is missing. ROS has write all properties, but on which object? We cannot determine that, right? And another thing here is that this report that you see right here only looks for parent permissions. For instance, let's say I have an OU nested inside 2 or 3 other OUs and I query the effective access of a user, it will only show me the permissions of the parent OUs, namely the OUs that are visible here. Any nested OUs or any OUs that are inside a particular OU, the permissions will not be shown, right? So these are the two options that Microsoft offers to monitor permissions on security objects. And when it comes to files and folders, I'm pretty sure you know what's happening here, right? All you have is simply the security tab right here to monitor permissions for your files and your folders as well, similar to monitoring your Active Directory security objects, right? And monitoring your security objects is crucial. For instance, let me show you an example here. On the domain node that we just saw, right? If I quickly head back to my VM and open up the ADUC tool, the domain node that you see here, right? On the domain node, if I right click on it and head into properties, and if I scroll down, you'll find something called replicating directory changes right here, right? So any user who has this permission can replicate changes between domain controllers. So what does that mean to an attacker or an adversary? The user can request password hashes of any user within the on-prem environment. Right now, this attack could potentially extend into Azure Active Directory as well, because most applications use these permissions to update their database to that of what changes that have happened within the Active Directory database. So replicating directory changes, think of them as the permissions needed to update changes, not just between domain controllers, but also between other applications such as SharePoint or Forefront Identity Manager to update their database to that of Active Directory's database, right? So any user who has these permissions can request for password hashes like you can see here. Now, 2 tips that I would give for you to secure your permissions within your Active Directory environment, right? Within your on-premises environment. First thing is to implement least privilege access. Second thing is to set time-bound access. So this is how it's going to work, right? Let me quickly minimize this, head on to my browser, and first, let's see how to view the permissions. So if I head into security reports here, you can see that we have a bunch of reports here just for your Active Directory objects. So let me click on AD objects accessible by accounts. So I will quickly, here we go. Let me just log in here and head into reports and then AD objects accessible by accounts inside security reports, right? So I have a user called Luna here and I want to see any control that Luna has, right? And these are all of Luna's permissions on the domain. Now let me quickly show you something. If I hit search, if I head into object class and select domain DNS right here, click on permissions, you can now see all permissions on the domain DNS node, namely, here you go, right? Ross has replicating directory changes like we just saw. And Brad also has replicating directory changes, so does Luna. right? So this report right here will help you to find out permissions about all Active Directory objects. You can filter it, you can search for specific things, and of course, you can export it as well. Right, now let me show you another example. If I head into search permissions, I have an OU that I've selected here. Now you could select multiple OUs. And I have a user called Luna selected right here. And if I hit generate, you can now see the members of the OU, right? What the effective access option in the ADUC tool shows is just the permission of this particular OU, right? Permission that Luna has on this particular OU, but the tool AD Manager Plus can dig into nested permissions or nested objects within that OU as well. For instance, if I click on Brooklyn support right here, right, you can now see that Luna has the reset password ability on the Brooklyn support OU, which is a nested member of the support new Australia OU, something that the native tools cannot do because they only query the parent permissions, right? So this search permissions tab gives you the ability to search permissions for any object in Active Directory, any object in your on-prem infrastructure for any user, right? You can set permission levels right here. You can simply drill down, select allow, deny, search for a combination of permissions, and you can do much more. And the security reports tab will help you with all that. So this reports right here will give you insights on what's happening within your on-prem Active Directory, on your security objects, namely. What happens to my file servers, for instance, my Windows file servers. We have something called NTFS reports right here. Once I'm in NTFS reports, all I have to do is click on, let's say, permissions for folders. You can now see that I have a folder called confidential selected here, and I can check permissions inside subfolders as well, right? No right clicking, no checking the security tab. Just select the path, select the subfolder level, hit generate, and you have the permissions right in front of you. You can see now that these are permissions on the parent folder. These are permissions on the subfolder and the subfolder, and so on, based on the filter that you've specified right here. Right? You can take this report, export it, and keep it safe just in case your auditors come and check. Right? And you can also monitor permissions on your file servers and your Active Directory security objects. So now that we have insight on the permissions, you may have noticed that there are no management actions on top of the report. So how do we fix this? So if I head into management tab, we have something called file server management right here, right? Now, all I have to do is add a file server that I wish, any Windows file server within the organization. Simply head into, let's say, modify NTFS permissions, right? I can select multiple folders here. Let's just say the folder which is confidential inside my DC, right? I can set the permissions right here. I can add in multiple permissions. And once you click modify, you are good to go. Now, the key thing that you need to remember here is I can modify permissions across all my Windows servers. I can modify multiple permissions, and there are special checkboxes here, right? For instance, remove all permissions and place the permissions that you've specified here. That will basically restructure a folder's permission structure, or the access control list to be more precise. If you already have a folder with secure permissions or with least privileged access, like I said, implemented, you can simply copy the permissions from that folder and you can apply it to the existing folder. So this one tab can help you to manage permissions for all of your file servers within your organization. Right? Now, since we are in the management tab, let me quickly show you something else. If I head into user management, you can modify user attributes at bulk as well. Right? One way is to generate the report and modify the options then and there via management options present within the report. The other way is to simply directly modify them. For instance, if you want to modify group attributes for a bunch of users, right? You can select the groups that the users have to be added to. Let's just say the administrators group right here. You can select the groups that users need to be removed to, right? You can simply enter a name right here or import a CSV file with the required names. For instance, you can see right here, I have a CSV file with a list of usernames, right? All I have to do is simply import it here, hit go, and the permission changes or the group membership changes that I made here will immediately apply to all of those users. So these are bulk attribute changes, using which you can pinpoint to users specific attributes and you can make the changes to bulk users. This applies for your on-premises Active Directory, for applications such as Exchange, your other objects like computer, groups, your mailboxes for your on-prem Exchange applications. Of course, I showed you the file server management app, and also for your Office 365 or Azure Active Directory as well. All you have to do is head into the management tab, and there's a lot you can do here. For instance, if I want to reset passwords for a bunch of users, all I have to do is simply click on reset password, select the tenant, right? Set the password flags right here and simply enter the name of the user or import a CSV file with the names, hit find or hit search and let it apply. This is how you could reset passwords for the bulk of your users, right? Something that's not possible with the native tools. If you have to reset a password or change group memberships using native tools, you'll have to do it manually using the ADUC tool. But by using AD Manager Plus, you can target an individual attribute and you can let the change replicate to all the users, right? Simply select the attribute, given the name, and you're good to go. So that's one thing that I would like for you to do, right? Using the security reports and NTFS reports, you were able to get insight on permissions on your security objects and your file servers, and you can implement least privilege access using the file server management tab like we just saw. The next thing that I would like for you to do is to set time-bound access, like you can see I have done here, right? So what time-bound access does is basically if I head into AD Manager Plus and head into workflow right here and click on create a request, right? So any user, any AD user configured as a requester can create a request, and let's say set folder permissions. You can select a folder, you can set the priority, and you can request for permissions, and that can be for a specified amount of time, right? Either forever or let's just say 30 minutes. And once you send a request, right, users would receive it, right? A request for it, reviewers receive it, approver approves it, and an executor has the final say in things. So for critical operations such as password changes or group membership changes or file or folder permission changes, you can set time-based access. Like you can see, I have shown you here, set folder permissions. And also we have the same option for adding people to a group. That could be time-based as well, right? So a requester can simply raise a request. And if you wish to have that additional control, you can let it go through multiple approvers and reviewers to make sure that the change that is requested is being monitored, right? So there are two advantages to this. You have multiple checkpoints where you can monitor what's happening within your organization's infrastructure, and not just that, it's time-bound access. So access once granted can be forgotten because the access would be revoked automatically after the specified time, right? Now, this seems like good work. We gained a lot of visibility and we saw how we could manage the tasks that are happening within the management abilities within the reports for our on-prem and for our cloud. And we also took a brief look at the management tab for more bulk management and access changes actions, right? You could also streamline these actions using AD Manager Plus. For instance, I have a bunch of employees that are coming in, right? So using an automation feature in AD Manager Plus, I can create these user accounts across multiple applications like Office 365, Exchange Server, or G Suite, right? This entire process can be completely automated, right? So let me quickly show you an example here. If I head into the automation tab and click on create new automation, let's say I want to create an automation to create users in hybrid AD. If you could recollect the example that I gave earlier, where a HR calls me up, asks me to create users in all three hybrid environments, right? Namely Active Directory, Exchange, and probably Office 365 and G Suite, right? Now, all I have to do is simply select a task called create users, select a template, specify the location of the CSV, namely a file with the list of usernames like you can see right here. You can set the execution time. When would you want the automation to run? You can enable notification to notify the administrator or a respective helpdesk technician via email and SMS. And once you hit save and run, the automation would be set up, right? So whenever you need to create users, just add users to the CSV file, like you can see here, and you are good to go. The automation will take care of it for you, but at the same time, everything is monitored because the admins are notified 24/7. Whenever an automation runs, the admin is sent a notification. So the admin or the help desk knows what's happening. Right now, the applications of automation is endless. This is just one. Another thing could be to clean up inactive accounts. Let's say you have stale users, namely users who are enabled but haven't logged on across your environments, your Active Directory, your Office 365, or your Exchange servers. You can set up an automation and set up the cleanup, namely disable and move, delete them. You can basically clean up all stale or inactive user accounts across your hybrid IT environment, right? Just by using automation. Just set it up, set a specific time, set up a notification, and you are good to go. So a quick summary of what we saw today. We saw why organizations tend towards the hybrid IT model, why it's increasingly being adopted, right? And then we saw a few challenges that come in with hybrid IT. The first challenge was visibility, right? So we used the reports within AD Manager Plus to gain visibility on our hybrid IT environment, namely on-premises Active Directory, Exchange, and Azure Active Directory. Once that's done, we use the built-in management actions in the report to fix any problems that we saw, right? And also the management tab to bulk fix accesses and permissions within your hybrid IT environment. So we got the insight, we were able to fix the vulnerabilities, and we also streamlined management actions with automation. Are we done yet? Are we good now? It's always good to have a backup and a restore plan, right? So AD Manager Plus can help you with that. With AD Manager Plus, admins and help desk can back up all changes within Active Directory. Right? For instance, changes to your users, computers, your contacts, your groups, your containers, and your connected applications as well. For instance, applications such as Exchange, right? Attributes that belong to on-prem and connected on-prem applications like Exchange can all be monitored, can all be backed up with AD Manager Plus's backup and recovery feature. Right? So just in case something goes bad, just in case you reach a state where you have to rise back up again from the ashes, you can use the backup feature here to immediately restore what has been backed up. You could have incremental backups, or you could take full backups of your on-prem environment and the connected on-premises applications. So yes, that's about it for today. We started off with hybrid IT. We learned how to gain visibility. We learned how to fix vulnerabilities after we got the visibility. We learned to streamline a few actions across hybrid IT with automation. And we also set up a backup and a recovery model for on-premises environments, just to have a safety net, just to be safe. Now, before I end this webinar, I will be pushing out a few polls that you will see across your screen. And if you could help me with the answers, that would be really great, right? So I'll just push in a poll that you will find that will flash across your screen. And if you can help me out with the answers, that would be really great. This is for my internal team. It'll only take a few seconds, right? Just a few seconds. If you can just give me the answers, I promise I will be out of your hair. Thank you so much for your responses. Just a few more seconds and I promise I'll be out of your hair. But in the meantime, if you've got any questions, just use the chat box and keep them coming. I'll take them as soon as the polls are done. Perfect. Now launching another poll. I hope you found this session informative. I tried to cram in as much as information as I could in the limited time that we had. I really hope you found it informative. I really hope there was something valuable for you to take back. If you could let me know your thoughts on it, that would be really great. Thank you so much for your responses, guys. All right, perfect. Now, I hope you found this session informative. Now, I will be here for the next 10 to 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, please keep them coming in via chat. I already see there are a few questions coming, but if you have questions later in the day, just drop me an email anytime to abi@manageengine.com, abi@manageengine.com, and I would be more than happy to help you out. All right. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Stay home, stay safe. And I will be here for the next 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, please keep them coming. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day today.